I'm starting a new life, turn wrongs into right. This is the Being Beloved podcast.
Greetings and thank you for joining us for the Being Beloved podcast. I'm your host, Dr. Rolanda Spencer.
On today's podcast of Being Beloved, we speak to Ivy Johnson, who tells a story of how childhood trauma led her to addiction and then incarceration. In re-entry, she began to reclaim herself and ultimately found reconciliation.
I'm starting a new life.
My name is Ivy, and I am the outreach coordinator for SWAG, which is the social justice arm of Why Not Prosper. I am also an ADL for Why Not Prosper. I am the accountability person. I am a psychiatric first responder, and I love my job.
All right. Okay, so let's talk about, well, what year did you go in?
I went to prison in 97.
97. So tell us about your neighborhood, Philly, 1997.
Was not in Philly.
Okay, where were you?
I was in Williamsport. I had went to Williamsport for recovery.
Okay.
And I had acquired on nearly a year clean and relapsed. I got high one time, and the next thing I knew, I woke up in Muncie State Correctional State Institution with 18 to 42 years sentence for third-degree homicide.
Okay. So let's talk about how you got there. Okay, so let's go back as far as you feel like is necessary in your journey. We'll start from the beginning.
Okay. Mother, teenage, unmarried, single parent with me. My first child, she's angry about it.
Still.
Clearly angry about it. Appeared to be angry at me all the time. Doesn't seem like I could do anything right for my mother. My mother had a string of bad relationships and or marriages that produced my sister and my brother. As a child, I was quiet. Nothing like I am now. I was quiet. I wanted to be in a corner. I didn't want anyone to see me or just scared all the time. And for the most part, I was scared because my cousin who lived across the street was molesting me, who would later rape me and took my virginity. And I carried that secret around. That's a heavy burden for a child. My protector, my champion was my grandmother, who went to jail for killing her husband. And I didn't tell my great-grandparents because they were too old. I didn't think they would understand. I didn't think they would believe me either, because that's what he told me. And as a child, he's a little older. He was older than me. So, of course, I believed what he said, that no one would believe me.
Okay. So tell us about the backdrop. Were you in Philly at that time?
Yes.
Okay, so let's talk about the city then. What neighborhood were you in?
I was in Wilson Park Projects in South Philadelphia.
Okay, so let's talk about that. What was the environment like?
The environment was one such as like when you went outside, your neighbors watched you and you played with all the kids and things like that. I liked going outside because I felt safe outside. It was in the house I had a problem. Until, my nerves got so bad that somebody was sending me over to see my cousin that I was peeing on myself.
How old were you then?
At 9. And I was peeing on myself. So, I'm like, all the other little kids are laughing at me. She's peeing on herself. And then it was always permissible for my siblings to tease me. My father was incarcerated from the time I was 2. Not that I knew him before then, but he was incarcerated. And it was common thing in our house to say, Ivy doesn't have any father. Your father's a jailbird. You're going to be a jailbird too. Look what I turned out to be. So that was common. So my self-esteem was real low as a child. Definitely low.
Besides the obvious, right? With your cousin, what else contributed, do you think, to your low self-esteem as a child?
Not feeling that my mother liked me or even wanted me, and was always saying I was the mistake or the accident.
Did you have any support?
Well, I had my great grandparents. My grandmother went to jail for killing her husband, but I had my great grandparents, so they were my escape. They helped me by, letting me be a kid. My great grandmother taught me how to be a young lady. She taught me about cleaning myself and shopping and cooking and things like that. Made you feel worthy, made you feel appreciated as a young person.
And so, from 9 to 17, I would imagine that was a tumultuous time.
Very much so.
To say the least, right?
Very much so.
So can you give us some insight into what that was like for you?
So, my mother was a drug addict, and I went through that. For the most part, I played the parent in my mother's house. I was the one who had to take my siblings, had to wake my siblings up in the morning, make sure they got bathed for school and sign their homework and things like that. I grew up very fast, very fast. I went from being 9 to being 16 in like tomorrow, so.
So what did you do to protect yourself during that time while you were trying to protect your siblings? Who protected you?
Nobody. Well, when my grandmother came home from jail, I moved with my grandmother. So, yet even that was an issue, because my mother would manipulate the situation. If she couldn't get this or that out of my grandmother, but send Ivy home. So I never felt like I had a home. I went from I was at my mother's sometime, my grandmother sometime, my great-grandmother sometime, my great-grandfather sometime. I never felt like I had a home. No stability. And everywhere you go, it's a different set of rules. And not that the rules were bad, it's just confusing for a kid to keep up with that much stuff.
Okay. So you said that there was one mistake that you made. Not maybe one mistake that you made in your life, but that sent you and put you into the criminal justice system.
No.
Okay.
I didn't say that.
Okay. Make sure, yes.
That sent me to the criminal justice system that time.
That time.
I had been going in and out of jail because, unlike my predecessor, Star, I was around for crack.
Okay. Okay.
I was around for crack, and I partook in crack, and I partook in crack with my mother.
Mothers, wives, sisters, aunts, women of the community began to disappear when crack cocaine was dumped into black neighborhoods in the 1980s. To see just how deep of an impact the spike of drug addiction amongst women had when crack was introduced, we spoke with Long Beach, California-based social worker Sherry Ross. In our conversation, she gave both a professional perspective and her personal experiences.
The first thing that comes to mind is that it created a epidemic, I would say, a flood of motherless daughters and sons in the community. Secondly, I guess, and then in every way, everything that could be affected from that, from overwhelming the foster care system to creating cycles of just a ridiculous cycle of shame and poverty. Anything that could be affected when you remove, mothers from the home. Because you just had mothers, even for the women who were not incarcerated because of their drug use, but you had just a community of women who were there but not there. And then so others had to step, a lot of times children, like myself, I was sharing stories with other friends who I know who their parents struggled with crack cocaine addiction, having to step up and be the mother in the household, make sure meals were getting made, cleaning, whatever, babysitting, all those things that, children have to step up and do when the parents are not there. When the crack cocaine epidemic hit, massively children being removed from the home. period, point blank, right? Like CPS, whatever other agency, just coming into the community and removing children, putting them in the system, putting them in foster homes, putting them in a group home. And not just social workers doing that, but you have other people in the community reporting women and doing those different things. And if that particular family did not have people to step up, so to speak, and take those children, then those children ended up in the system for sure, going from foster home, group home to group home. And a lot of times just from that situation being led right into the prison industrial complex. So it's just an assembly line of Black, children going from one system to the next because of their parents not being present.
Crack really had no rules, had no boundaries, had no restrictions. The values of the city plummeted. Like, people that you knew as good, upstanding people turned into the most ruthless, diabolical people you ever want to meet in your life. People you would actually be scared of. People that you once took refuge in became monsters under crack. Yes, absolutely.
And did the gang affiliations rise during that time as well?
I've never known it to be any gangs in Philly. I don't even know where anybody's getting that from. In Philly, it's more like corners. You're from that corner or that corner, you're from that neighborhood or that neighborhood. I've never known it to be gangs in Philly.
But they were organized in the way that they were selling crack?
Yeah, they were organized. They were definitely organized.
Okay.
Definitely.
So you wouldn't classify them as gangs. They were more like street organizations?
Yeah.
Okay, that's fair.
Or like crews or something like
Yeah.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah. Like corners or something. Yeah.
So how did you find yourself getting into that part of the game, like using?
Oh, well, I started off, I guess, like most people with marijuana. Then someone introduced me to powder cocaine, so I was snorting. And then in the, I don't want to say 80s, 90s, in the 90s, somebody said, try this, and I did. And the thing about crack is you only get high off it the first time you use it. After that, you're just chasing, trying to get that same high again. And earlier, Star mentioned that there was no, I heard her say, there was no detox for crack. That's because crack is not a physical addiction. There's no detox for it. You only think you need it. You don't really need it. It's not like heroin. Heroin has a physical addiction. That's why you have to detox. You don't have to detox from crack.
Can you explain that a little bit more? Because I've never heard anybody say that before.
Heroin, your body physically needs it. Crack, you only think you need it. It's not a physical addiction. It's a psychological addiction.
So you don't have withdrawals
No.
and things like that? Interesting.
No, you do not have withdrawal from crack.
Okay. So it's more just trying to go back and get that first high?
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
So can I ask a question?
Yes, ma'am.
Often in the media, when they depict the crack epidemic, they always show like a person who's strung out, who's shaking.
Right. That's I like Pookie.
Yeah.
No.
Pookie from New Jack City.
No. That's not how they go.
Okay.
You might want more, but you don't. You're not sweating and palpitating, and because it's not a physical addiction.
Okay. So maybe when people act like that, they're doing other things.
Right.
Yeah.
It is. That's other drugs they're doing as well, or other drugs. Period.
Right.
Yes, I agree.
Okay. Well, that's a good thing to know. Yes.
Can I ask one more question? This is a short deviation.
No.
A very short deviation. In between your childhood and the time you took your first hit, what's a happy memory? Or what made you happy? Like genuinely.
What made me happy was hanging out with my great grandmother. And my grandmother too. My grandparents were my happy place. My grandparents was definitely my happy place, and I'm going to tell you, if it wasn't for the things that my grandmother instilled in me, cause she told me stories that made me feel good about myself. You know, she said, you know, I was there the day you was born, and you was in there with all them babies, and I knew exactly which one you was. And I said, Mama, how you know exactly which one I was? She said, because you was black just like me. You know, so that always made me feel good, you know. And my great-grandmother always doted on me and protected me and taught me how to make biscuits and fried clean chicken. The first time I cleaned chicken, I took all the skin off.
You cleaned it for real.
Yes, it was sterilized.
Now, your grandparents and great grandparents from the South?
My great-grandparents were, not my grandmother. My grandmother was born in Philadelphia. My great-grandparents met on the train ride coming to Philadelphia, and that was it. Until my great-grandfather got abusive to my great-grandmother, and they separated. Yeah.
So, I think we were going into so now you're a teenager, you're having these.
Now I'm a teenager, and I realize boys.
Okay. Always.
I noticed that I was getting attention from boys.
Boys or men?
Both.
Okay. Okay.
You know, I had a little waistline and big hips and a big butt. Oh, here's a way to get money.
Okay.
You know, so I was getting money off of guys, boys, old men, whoever, you know, because I wasn't getting any from my mother, that was for sure. Mm-hmm. You know, so I learned that. And also by that time was selling drugs, because an older guy had said, I went down there to buy some weed, and he gave me a lot of weed, and I started selling it to my mother and her friends. And that was my first hustle.
So, you talk a lot about your mother in your strained relationship, but I would like to go back to sort of like Kaia's question. Do you have a memory of your mother where you felt close to her? And what changed if you did have that?
I only ever felt close to my mother when we were getting high together. I felt like when I brought her drugs, she liked me.
Is that why you brought her drugs?
Yes.
So how did that change your relationship? How you felt about yourself?
Lowered my self-esteem.
It lowered your self-esteem?
Absolutely.
So how did you get that back? How did you come into yourself and say?
Oh, that was years later. That was well into my incarceration.
How much time did you do?
18 and a quarter years.
Okay.
That was into my incarceration. You know. In jail, I was like the queen of contraband.
Okay.
You know, I started a store less than 30 days after I got in prison. I was selling stuff. When I hit campus, I was selling stuff. You name it, I sold it. Vegetables, fabric, chicken. If it stood there long enough, I sold it.
Okay.
And then, like any other addiction, you know, hustling is an addiction.
Oh, yeah.
Hustling is an addiction. So, as time progressed, I started selling drugs in the penitentiary. Oxycontin, morphine, and methadone. Now I'm hot. Now the institution's got a problem with me, because when I just sold merchandise, they really didn't bother me. But when people's nodding in the yard and nodding in the library, they're getting urines, and I'm guided off Ivy. I had 13 people make statements on me, and I was under state police investigation. But they really couldn't indict me because the people who gave the statements were high. co-conspirators. You can't indict me on a statement from a co-conspirator. And I knew it. Never been dumb.
Right. Right.
So you couldn't get an indictment on me, so they transferred me to Cambridge Springs.
Being Beloved podcast was made possible by a grant from the Valentine Foundation and also sponsored by Love Now Media.
At home, you had that hustle mentality, right? You were able to get things for people that they wanted or needed.
I'm going to refer to a movie like Star did. Mm-hmm. Okay, Shawshank Redemption.
Okay.
I'm Red.
Okay. Okay.
I'm Red in Shawshank Redemption.
Who was Red? I don't remember.
The guy that sold the stuff, that always got the stuff when people want. That was me.
Morgan Freeman.
Morgan Freeman.
Oh,
yeah.
Okay.
Morgan Freeman. I'm Morgan Freeman, and you know. I built relationships that way. Because it's a trust thing. A lot of times when you give someone an item in jail, you're not getting your compensation on site.
Right.
You might not get your compensation till a week or two later. Mm-hmm. You know, sometimes you did, depending on what you were selling. Mm-hmm. But a lot of times you had to give somebody something and trust that they were going to give you your compensation back. You know, or that they were scared enough to give it back. Mm-hmm. You know?
Do you think that made you like a force while you were in prison? That gave you some power while you were
Definitely gave me power, because I had access to things that other people couldn't get, or some people could get, but the vast majority of people there couldn't get.
And how do you think that changed your experiences from the average person, having that sort of power while you're in there?
Made me more like a commodity.
Okay, how so?
Because, like, people get married in jail, mm-hmm. and I had rings.
Okay.
And I had rings, you know, so... Like, a lot of times, people like, you owe Ivy money, you can't play cards here, you know? You got to pay Ivy.
Do you think your experience would have been much different if you did not have that at your disposal?
If it wasn't that, it would have been something, but in jail, you have to find where you fit in. Mm-hmm. And either you're going to be a shark or you're going to be a guppy.
Okay.
You got, right.
Okay.
Star was a shark.
Oh, Jesus.
Right. You know, you have to make up your mind. Okay, but a lot of things come into play where your status is in jail. Mm-hmm. Your crime being one of them.
Okay.
If you're a child molester, baby killer, or something like that, unless you in a relationship with somebody of higher status, you're going to get ate up. So that comes into play. Where you're from. I'm from South Philly. Star from South Philly. That give you cool points in jail. I don't know why, but it does. You know, a lot of things come into play where you fall in line in status in prison.
So in terms of your sense of self or self-esteem, do you think it was higher while you were incarcerated?
My self-esteem was wrapped around my hustling, absolutely.
Okay.
It was not what I'd done, it was who I was.
How would you describe your self-esteem, your sense of self at that time? How did you see yourself?
A G. A G, but look where you a G at.
Right.
You know, if you a G you at the bottom of society, you in jail. So you're like really fooling yourself. Mm-hmm. You know, a wash rag in the mud is just a dirty rag. You know, but it helped me sustain me for while I was there. But at some point, I had to come to the realization that I could not bring that person home. Because if I brought that person home, I was coming back to jail. And I'm going to tell you, I'm going to be really transparent right now. I used to get on my knees and pray. God, please, please help me stop. I could not stop. People, I would come in my cell and people would have jewelry and stuff on my bed with a note. The girl sent this, she was 4 packs. And I'm back off to the races. It was like I was like on another kind of drug or something.
So they would pull you back into it?
No, they didn't pull me back in. I fell back into it.
Okay.
Can't nobody pull you anywhere.
Okay.
But it was just like I just didn't know how to stop hustling. Even under state police, and I was being investigated by the police. I was in the hole for 5 months, came out. Everybody giving me the stuff they owe me from when I'm back off at the races again. You know, and I prayed to God, please, Lord. So one day they called me up to the counselor's office. And I noticed when I sit down in the counselor's office, an officer come in and stand behind me. So I'm like, what's this? So she's like, Ivy, Miss Johnson, because they didn't call you by your first name. Miss Johnson, you're going, we're transferring you to Cambridge. I ain't going to Cambridge. I said, yes, you are going to Cambridge. So they sent me to Cambridge. But that was God. That was God, because in Cambridge, I didn't have access to my supply chain. I was like in COVID. Damn it, supply chain. You know, so God did something for me that I couldn't do for myself, which was take me slow, help me, move me away from that hustling, you know, the contraband and illegal. And it ain't the hustling that's the bad part. It's the product. It's the product. It wasn't the hustle, it's the product, because I still got hustle in me today, but I switched the product, you know. So when I got to Cambridge is a lot of rats up there. Would you agree? Yeah, I guess you would. It's a lot of rats up Cambridge. So you can't do the same thing because they tell on you.
Is there a demographic shift from Cambridge? Is there a difference in the population?
Oh yeah, definitely. First thing I noticed was like the child molesters like intermingled. In Muncie, they was like, they had their own thing going on. Like they had their own table out. It was like an unwritten thing, but people would be like, don't sit there, that's the child molester table. You know, but in Cambridge, they kind of intermingled with everybody. And you really didn't know who a child molester was.
Why was that important? To know who the child molester was?
Don't nobody want to live with a child molester. I'm sorry. I'm sorry if I'm offending anybody, but no. Nobody. No.
Okay, but in Cambridge,
They was a little bit more tolerant. I want to use tolerant of child molesters. Like in Muncie, when like stuff happened to child molesters, the cops would be like, "Oh well." Up Cambridge, like, they run to the rescue.
were there more? I'm just going to ask you. Were there more white people?
Yeah,
Okay.
I think so.
And when you say rats, is that what you mean? That
Snitches.
They'll tell on you. If you. Okay.
Right.
But that helped you.
Yes.
Okay. So
That helped me. That helped me. That helped me. Now I'm running to another problem. Okay, so now I can no longer be Hustle Ivy. Who am I? I had to make a decision who I was going to be.
And who did you choose?
I chose to help people, Ivy. You know, I changed my own narrative.
Why did you feel it was important to do that?
Because if I wasn't going to be help Ivy, I was going to be hurt people Ivy. And I didn't want to be hurt people Ivy anymore. I had done the one thing that I said I would never do. I had hurt a child. Simultaneously, I had hurt 7 kids by killing their mother.
And was that from the drugs?
Oh, that was from taking a life.
Oh, taking a life. Okay.
That's what I was convicted of.
Okay. Okay.
You know?
Do you want to talk about that at all, or?
I do want to say this. I want to say this, and I am so elated to be able to say this. Since I've been home, I have had conversations with my victim's daughter, who forgives me. And I have had a conversation with her son, who also forgives me. And I'm going to tell you, that's by the grace of God.
How important was that to you?
It was everything. It was everything. It was everything.
Did you have to wait till you got home to get that?
Well, yeah. You know, and I would always hope that any one of her children would be the one or any, you know. And yeah, I even ran into her daughter in the supermarket, not too far from here. You know, we had a conversation. And it was everything.
So let's talk about you coming home.
Okay.
Okay, let's leave that where it was. So, when did you find out you were coming home?
Okay, I was released in 2015. It was a process. I don't know if you know the process, but you wait on this paper called the green sheet. The green sheet tells you either you're getting a hit, which could be 3 months, 6 months, 9 months, it could be 5 years. So you wait on this paper called a green sheet. And people actually kill themselves waiting on this green sheet. I waited 15 weeks for a green sheet. But I'm going to tell you a story, though. One night I couldn't sleep. And so I get up and I turn the TV on, and this thing is like an infomercial or something on. And it talks about faith. And it says, if you want something, live like you have it. So like if you want $1 million, live like you have the $1 million. Okay? So I'm like, I want to go home. I'm going to live like I'm going home. So the next day when I get up, I start giving all my stuff away. I had these books called Uncle John's Bathroom Readers, which are, I don't know if you ever heard of them, which are these trivia books. They're supposed to be like trivia books you put in the bathroom while you go in the bathroom. But I had a whole stack of them, and they were kind of expensive. And all the officers knew I loved these books. And I was giving them out, and I was giving out things of cigarettes and this, that. So they sent me to psych. Come to find out, giving away your stuff you like is a sign that you may be wanting to kill yourself. So they sent me over to psych, right? I had never been to psych. I've never been on psych meds. So I'm like, so I told the man, you know, I'm leaving, so I don't need the stuff. So he sends me back. He says, nothing wrong with her. She just believes she's leaving. The counselor calls me in and she says, Ivy, you know, you don't have a good rapport with the institution. You know, you have a murder conviction. You could possibly not go home. So if you don't go home, please don't tear the jail up. I'm like, I'm not. I'm going home. So when the call-out sheet, and that's your sheet for your appointments, you look on it, and it's 2 different ladies. One lady you get called if you're getting a hit, and one lady you get called if you're going home. I'm on to see the lady that gives you a hit. So everybody's like, oh, well, I'm sorry. So I'm up there, I'm like, God, please let me only be getting a 3-month hit. Lord, I'm praying for the, best case scenario. Right. But when I go over there, come to find out, the lady that sees you when you're going home was sick, so the hit lady had to take her place, and I was going home. And I went home, and I'm going to tell you about God. I went home on my minimum. I think I was like only 2 days over my minimum on a homicide. That is virtually unheard of.
Right. Did you get paroled out?
Yes. Okay. Yes.
So tell me about coming home. Did you come back to Philly?
Yeah, I came back to Philly.
Okay, so tell me about that.
Well, I came home and I had to go to a halfway house because nobody had prepared anywhere for me to live. So I had to go to a halfway house. And I did. And I paroled from the halfway house to my little brother's house, who's 5 years younger than me. He's my younger brother. He's not little. And he got drunk and put me out. And I had to go back to the halfway house again. This time when I left the halfway house, I paroled, me and the girl I know was sharing an apartment, and she relapsed, so leaving dope bags all over. So then I moved in with a guy I work with that he's rented me a room. Then he started trying to get touchy. So I left from there, and then I got my own place. And that was substandard. The living room was leaking. So by that time, I got a little boyfriend. He got locked up. So I moved from there to another place, which was also water coming down the basement. The housing situation for people on parole is horrible. Horrible. If there's 20 houses, if there's 100 houses being rented to everybody, only 20 of them are going to be willing to rent to people on parole. And that 20, I can almost guarantee you, 17 of them are going to be substandard.
Did they give you any resources at all?
Oh yeah, they gave me something called the BBC or something like that, where they paid like your first and last month's rent and like 3 additional months or something. Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And was that helpful at all?
It was helpful.
Okay.
But them 6 months went past quick.
I'm sure.
Yeah, it was helpful.
So it doesn't sound like your transition was the easiest, the smoothest.
Was not.
Okay, so what helped you ultimately get back?
Re-entry programs.
Okay, which re-entry program did you do?
Initially, I did. I was at Mothers and Additionally, I was at Connections Training Academy, where I had a life skill coach named Mr. Rashad Salahuddin. And Mr. Rashad Salahuddin brainwashed me into never going back to jail.
Okay.
Do you understand this? Yes, he did. And I have to commend Mr. Salahuddin. And by the end of the class, I was the only female left in the class. And 80% of my class, I am still very close with.
Well, what did he do that was different than everyone else?
Well, he was a returning citizen himself.
Okay.
So I knew from which he spoke. And he's the one that said, don't change the hustles, change the product. Okay. You know? And that stuck with me. And he also talked about staying out of the hole. And he just talked about some things that really hit home for me.
Had anybody ever took the time to really talk to you like that before?
Not anybody that talked from experience. Okay. If you never been to prison, how can you tell me not to go to prison? You ain't never went. Right. You know, it's easy to say don't go to prison if you ain't never went. You know, but it's easier to go back once you've been there. Right. You know, and yeah. And he taught me something that really raised my self-esteem, believe it or not. And what it was the eulogy of Julius Caesar. I can quote it right now. This was the noblest Roman of them all. All of the conspirators, save only he, did that they did in envy of great Caesar. He only in a genuine, honest thought and common goodwill made one of them. His life was gentle, and the elements so mixed in him that nature may stand and say to all the world, this was a woman.
And what does that mean to you?
That to me is Mark Antony eulogized Julius Caesar. And Mark Antony held Julius Caesar in the highest esteem. He was a great man. Why would you kill this great man? You killed Rome when you killed this man. You know, I would like someone to feel that way about me when I leave this earth. You know, greatness has been lost. You know, so that's how that makes me feel.
something I picked up. It's a thread that I see, and correct me if I'm wrong.
Okay.
When you were speaking about the relationship with your mother, and then the relationship you had with the guy who showed you or gave you stuff to hustle, a lot, and even in jail, a lot of your relationships were transactional.
Yes.
Yes.
I love you.
Yeah.
I do go into relationships on like I would a business transaction. I do. I do. I do.
Because the power is there. You have something that people want, right?
No, I don't think it's so much as the power is there. I understand that.
Okay.
I understand that. I understand that if you give me your word is a contract. Once you break that contract, now our business is over.
The power is in the negotiation.
And the negotiation. And the negotiation.
It makes sense though. You're the one that everybody needs. You're the one that everybody wants. You're the one that's sought after because you have all the stuff. You know what I'm saying? Like they can't make it without you. Is what it turns into.
Wow.
Yeah. So when you're talking about the legacy that you see for yourself, now that you are home and you understand that is a power that you have, right? To negotiate and,
Yes.
and get the things that people want. So how are you going to do that now in a way that'll allow people in the future to see you the way you want them to see you?
Well, now being an outreach coordinator, my job is basically to build relationships and expand the initiatives of SWAG. That is my job.
What's the initiatives of SWAG?
The initiatives of SWAG are the breaking all racial barriers, the vaccine equity clinics. We have several different initiatives. And I build partnerships. I go out in the community and I build partnerships. And we use these partnerships to better the community.
So tell me about the community as you see it today. And then we're going to get into the
How do I see the community
How do you
today?
see the community today? And how is it different from when you were here before?
So much more violent. So much more violent. Like people are dying for nothing. Facebook, that ain't even real life. Why would you kill somebody over something they said on Facebook? It's like you killing somebody on a cartoon or something. It's not even real. When I was incarcerated, my 15-year-old nephew was gunned down in my mother's vestibule. My mother crawled through his blood to try to put her finger in the bullet wound to save his life. A 16-year-old boy killed. That's two kings out the race. And I grieved that young man. I grieved that young man. I grieved my nephew, but I also grieved the person that took his life. And me and my mother go back and forth about that. And I tell her I forgive him. And she asked me how I could forgive him. I said, because I wanted somebody to forgive me. How can I not forgive him? But of course, having walked that path, you're not going to understand that.
I'm starting a new life. Thank you for those who are listening to the Being Beloved podcast, a podcast exclusively on Arc Republic that is committed to telling the narratives of formerly incarcerated women who are experiencing or going through reintegrating back into their communities and their respective homes. As well, we want to thank the Valentine Foundation for providing a grant for us to carry out this very special series. The Valentine Foundation is a Philadelphia-based organization committed to empowering women and girls. And as well, we must send a shout out to our sister organization, Love Now Media. Love Now Media is a company that is committed to an equitable future by amplifying acts of love, I love this, at the intersection of social justice, wellness, and equity. Lastly, and certainly not least, we would like to give gratitude to those who are listening, who are coming home, who are reestablishing themselves and going through reintegration. We want to let you know we are with you, we support you, we see you, and keep going even in the roughest days. Oh, and we did not forget those who are inside and are doing their time and those who are about to be released. We all love you. We all support you. And we hope that you grow and evolve with this Being Beloved podcast. And remember to keep being beloved, beloveds.
I'm starting a new life. Turn wrongs into right. This is the Being Beloved podcast.